Welcome to this week's episode of Fellowship in Essential Oils. When it comes to oils that are from the Melaleuca family, I thought I knew them all because I'm an Australian and we've got Tea Tree and Rosalina and all these amazing ones. But then there are Melaleucas beyond Australia, and today we're exploring one of them, which, to be honest with you, I haven't had much experience with. So we're going to be leaning on Liz a little bit more today. Liz, today we're looking at Cajeput.
We are, and feeling quite reflective actually on about the legacy of my family in essential oils and in aromatherapy in particular, because my mom had a tremendous career as an aromatherapist who treated people with pots of cream. And some of her most successful stories were using Cajeput. So it's really nice to think about that today and to talk about it a little bit. But you haven't used it at all, is that right?
I think I may have smelt it once or twice, but in my memory, I don't remember using it. But in looking and reading up about it, being native to not so much Australia, but Indonesia, it's around a lot in Malaysia and that type of thing. It's sometimes referred to as white tea tree. And I know also that it's kind of treated sometimes as a bit of a fix it all because it does a lot of things, or there's not too many plants around in certain areas. And I believe it's even one of the ingredients in good old tiger balm.
Oh, is it? I didn't know that. That doesn't surprise me though. It does have a very penetrating quality to it, and that's kind of the essence of tiger balm, isn't it? How deep it goes into the tissues. Yeah. So what's interesting about it is had a name change since I learnt about it. I always find that fascinating because it's like somebody's obviously thought something more about it. And do you know what Cajuput means?
I have no idea, and it was a question that was in my head. I'm like, will I get told off for stumping you? But obviously, I'm not
Mm-mm.
going to stump you on that one.
No, so it comes from the Tamil word which means white wood. And so when I trained, it used to be Melaleuca cajaputi, and sometimes still see it written as that. But now it's reclassified as Melaleuca leucadendruma. I think that was right, leucadendrum or something. But the new classification also means white wood. So I think that's quite interesting. And if I'm right in thinking, melaleuca is white leaves against black wood, or the other way around. It's mela is black, white is loica. So there's like this idea with the melaleuca trees that as the wind goes through the leaves, the tree seems to change colour because you see the dark and the white. So this is one with particularly white wood. It does smell very much like tea tree, I have to say. Although, so I did read somebody's work. I can't even remember who it was, so sorry if it's yours and I haven't cited you. Who'd said that it smells like lilac, and I was like, it does not smell like lilac. But then when I picked up this one, I was like, it doesn't smell like lilac, but I get it. I can kind of pick it up, and I'm perhaps glad that I never knew that before because I'm hideously allergic to lilac, so that would have put me off it. I always end up in hospital in lilac season, so that's not a good thing for me. So I'll stick to the tea tree smell for me. But I talked about mum's success. And the success came with treating psoriasis. So, those of you over the seas, and those of you who are younger than I am, may not remember that in the late 80s, early 90s, uh, in Glasgow, in Scotland, there was a horrific disaster. The Sellafield disaster was when a nuclear plant had a meltdown, and first of all, there was a lot of radiation in the area, which we could kind of sense all the way down in the Midlands. You know, you would notice things like acid rain and things like that. But also, it was a huge employer that suddenly thousands of people were out of work directly and indirectly, because not only of course those people that worked in the plant themselves, which were predominantly men, um, but those places that supplied Sellafield, and they'd got enormous contracts with them, engineering contracts, and immediately closed, contract gone. So many companies went bust, and it was the beginning of an enormous recession in Scotland. So at that time, Mum's business, Jill Bruce Aromatherapy, which then became the Apothecary, was at the height of its success. They were manufacturing, they manufactured over 140 different ranges of creams and lotions. At that time, it was before medicines controls came in, so you were allowed to put the word psoriasis on a pot of cream, which you couldn't do now. But she and her husband, Michael Cook, my stepdad, went all around the country to trade fairs, to agricultural fairs, craft fairs, and had this fantastic stall where they would see patients, clients over the counter all day, every day. And when they went up to Glasgow the first year after the disaster, they were absolutely horrified. I can remember my mum coming back crying with what she'd seen, that there were dozens upon dozens of men coming up to the stand every hour, behaving in the same manner. So the first thing was that they were covered in this enormous scale, which was psoriasis, but it was their skin was incredibly damaged. And I don't know if you have ever seen bad psoriasis. It's almost like they've got almost, apologies to everybody, it's almost like their skin goes like a tortoise's skin. It's so hard, it's scaly, it becomes almost like an armor over their skin, and can be very sore. They didn't seem to be suffering with pain, but it was just all over them, particularly on their faces and their arms. And it became kind of a bit of a thing that when we'd say we were going to Glasgow, everybody would go, bet you've never seen anything like that. Can't do anything with that, can you? And they would do it over and over again. And it became clear, wasn't clear the first year that they went, but over the subsequent years, it became very clear that this became the identity of the people who had been involved in the disaster. So these men were presenting with horrific skin conditions, but also they had lost all of their identity of who they were, and there was nothing left in terms of, they'd probably lost their houses, they'd lost their jobs, they'd lost, they were congregating in working men's clubs and just talking about how bad life was because there was nothing left for, excuse me, this personality started to shift across the men. And what started to happen was they would come and go, can't do anything with that, can you? And mum, those of you who have ever met my mum knows that she does a very, very good Joyce Grenfell voice. Well, I have a pot of cream. And she would you like me to put a little on your skin? And go, oh, yeah. Yeah. And they'd walk off. And they had no intention of buying at all. But as they went off to the bar or to the toilet, inevitably their wives would come back and go, "I'll have a bottle of that cream, please." And so it became this really, like, you just would know that they were never going to buy, but the wife was going to come back and buy. And we had dozens upon dozens of letters from the wives saying, thank you so much for what you've done. The skin has really improved, and his personality seems less angry with the world than he was. And somehow the Cajeput oil gave them back their hope. And it was really fascinating to see. So this went on for a long, long time. And actually, eventually, the International Federation of Aromatherapists asked Mum to go and lecture on it in London. And she presented a paper, which I've still got, actually. I was thinking I should try and find that out, where she talked about the exact protocols. Now, what's interesting is in those days, when you were trained as an aromatherapist in the UK, you were not trained with pots of creams and lotions. You were certainly not trained with roller bowls. I mean, that just out of the realms of possibility. You were always trained that an aromatherapy was a massage treatment. And of course, there was no massage involved in this. We'd always been taught to, the mind, body, spirit had to be affected through touch. And we'd proven, or she'd proven, nothing to do with me, that that's not so. That just simply allowing the essential oils to do their job. And I will give you the formula actually, because just to be clear, it's not entirely Cajeput. We had a backup to all of the formulae. So you would have lavender and chamomile to soothe the itching, myrrh to heal where it was cracked and broken, and then Cajeput for psoriasis, geranium for eczema. Simple as that. And yeah, a wax-based ointment. So we use Lanet wax. So it would cover it, and sometimes it wouldn't even absorb in. It would just do this coat, which frankly I never found very attractive, but it was very good because once you went to the loo and you washed your hands, if you got it on your hands, it would just lather up and go back in again. But it softened the skin very, very quickly. So within a sort of a week, you'd see that the patches were starting to get smaller. And again, an interesting fact was this was some of the earliest part of research into, no, you don't have to put it on all of the bad points. The oils will go through the body. And so we would say to people, right, where's the worst place you've got? And usually it would be on their face or on their arms. And then they'd have smaller plaques over their body and on their legs. So we would say, use it on your arms. And inevitably, over time, the plaques would start receding from the rest of the body. So it was a really fascinating thing to be close to watch, really. But when we look at the actual chemistry of the essential oil, it's really not that similar to tea tree. And it's interesting that it's one oil does it and one oil doesn't, because they're very similar. It's very high in 1,8-cineol. So to stress that even if you've got a baby with psoriasis, I really hope you haven't. But if you have, I would say to you, don't use this oil close to their face. You need to be using it on the backs of on the little backs in very small dilutions, because 1,8-cineol slows respiration in children. But if that's a horrible thing for a baby to have. And so what I would always say, if I don't really advocate using essential oils on children under the age of 6 months myself. I don't think their skin's well enough developed. But a baby of that, with that kind of condition, I would say that was an acute problem, an emergency situation. So as long as you were keeping it away from their face, you could use it, and you would want to use it in very low dilutions. For an adult, it's just the same as like a normal essential oil, 3%. So you would probably, for a child, want to go down to about 0.25%. It's got a very strange resonance to it. Usually you'll say things are warming and drying or cooling and moist. It's cooling and drying. So when you put it onto the skin, you can feel, it's very nice for use in the summer, but it does dry the skin out well. But then if you've got psoriasis, can really break, and it can properly, one of Mum's favorite words is suppurate. It breaks, and it's pussy, and it's sticky. Gets rid of that really quickly. And that is because of its astringency. So in every other way, I would say you could use it very similarly to how you use tea tree. I don't think there's that many surprises in the physical medicine, really. But emotionally, it's very clever oil. Before we go on to that, actually, another interesting thing is one of the ways that it is used big time these days is for tropical fish. So many of you will know that we are avid fish keepers in our family, and if you've ever seen what used to be called a Siamese fighting fish, or they're called betta fish now, presumably that's considered to be racist, or I don't know why it's changed, but betta fish. So beautiful. I just love them. I love them. They're such lovely creatures. They're so friendly and docile, but they are really susceptible to an illness called velvet, where they go from their beautiful red colour, blue colour, whatever, and then within minutes, their whole side goes over covered in like a white fungus called velvet, and it kills them fast. And so one of the precautionary solutions that you couldn't put into the fish tank, obviously it's diluted because essential oils won't go into water, they won't mix, so it's been diluted down and emulsified. Cajeput. So it helps with the velvet, but also fin rot. And also guppies are very susceptible to parasites in their gut. And again, Cajeput is in their treatment, is their main treatment for these parasites. So interestingly, that the velvet, you might not have clocked it in your head, but if you've watched it, it looks really like psoriasis. What's really fascinating, it's like fish psoriasis. And yeah, you would also use it for internal parasites like worms, tapeworm, horrible things in children that they pick up at school. Very good for that. And you could use that topically, just as a blend that you rub onto the belly or onto the back, because, as I say, the oil is really good at traveling around the body and picking out what it needs to do. So yeah.
I just want to clarify with the fish, would you recommend people like getting a single drop and putting it in their aquarium, or is there special, blends that you can buy that have the Cajeput in it?
So there are blends you can buy, but let's just, for a second, think about the physics of that. What happens if you put a drop of oil in your aquarium?
Yep, it's just going to sit on top.
It's going to sit on top, exactly right. So your fish, and some fish do come to the surface. And actually, better fish are some of those. They're what's called labyrinth fish. So they come up and they like to gulp the air. But that's all right. Like our fish tanks are 4 feet wide, you've got to get him to come right up in the right place. So that's just not going to work. You could do a dilution, I guess, in vodka. But better to just buy the correct treatment from the vets. But I have to say, before now, I have put essential oils in the water because we haven't had the treatment. We had the first time we had velvet, I had never seen it before, and it just went through the tank. You have one male and you have several females. And what was interesting was, well, it was really upsetting actually. I had 7 fish die all on the same day, and the other oil that's good for it is bay, but I just wasn't quick enough, not at all. So I think that if you do have better fish, I have lost so many that I just don't have them anymore. It's worth having a look in your pet dealer, and there will be treatments for velvet that you can just put into the water as like a prophylactic. And yeah, I think once you can see it on the skin, it's too late. Yeah.
I wanted to throw a few other physical ailments at you that I have seen related to Cajeput before. Genital herpes.
Well, I would say yes, because 1/8 Neil.
Yep. Hemorrhoids?
Well, because it's so astringent, it would tighten the blood vessel. But, well, I think geranium or helichrysum would be better.
Would be better. And varicose veins?
Geranium would be better. Yeah. I think what's interesting when you do this kind of work for long enough is there's only so many kinds of conditions, everyday conditions you can come up with, aren't there? And over time you start to get a medicine book in your head. and you will always go to those particular things. So if somebody came to me with psoriasis, I would always go Cajeput. But if somebody came to me with varicose veins or hemorrhoids, I would always go, actually, in both cases, geranium and helichrysum. So that's quite interesting that it's the same. I'm not saying that it wouldn't work. I just think it wouldn't be my go-to.
Yeah. And we've talked in previous episodes, obviously, about other oils high in 1,8-cineol, things like eucalyptus, ravensara, and laurel. Where is Cajuput on that kind of scale? Has it got about the same amount of eucalyptol, or is it a little bit lower? You know?
You should have asked me to do the book work before you asked me this. And I wouldn't say there was super high. I think maybe about 40%.
Okay.
But I don't know how that compares with others without getting pieces of papers out in front of me.
Yeah. You'd think after 86 episodes you would know that I'm going to ask questions like that, but one day we'll teach you.
I know. It's disgraceful, really. I'm going to start asking you questions now.
And watch me backpedal, and try and dig myself out of holes. So let's talk a little bit about the emotional aspects of this oil. I do find the Melaleuca family really interesting. I find them really great for clearing our stuff, and I guess I've done some reading on this oil. I've tuned into this oil, and I can see how it works in the Melaleuca family, but definitely very different to tea tree. But I'd be interested to hear your take on its emotional impact.
So I believe very strongly that it speaks to legacy, of reminding someone where they came from, what they were before the disaster happened. And that if somebody's suffering from, let's rephrase this differently, actually. So I talk about this a lot in my book, The Professional Stress Solution, how people can become very yin. So if somebody's suffering from something on a long term, and they're dependent on welfare, and they kind of become, they lose all of their kickback in life, which is their yang. And so then they become very cynical, and they lose their fight, but also they become quite angry at the state, even though the state is looking after them, because they feel, and in the case of Sellafield, in fact, I may have used this particular example in the book even, you really could understand why they were angry at the authorities, because everything was crumbling around them and they felt like they had no finger holding control. Everything was outside of their control. And necessarily, when you feel like you have no control, you become very yin. And when you become very yin, the energetics of being yin, you are passive and you are receptive, and so therefore people can just keep chucking things at you. It's like somebody who's been pummeled in a boxing ring and they just can't get back up again. Something about Cajeput goes, you can get up again, and it's very good at being able to say, dig deeper, remember who you are, remember what you are about, and helps you to bring back again. And I think that if somebody, it's not really, you would never see it recommended for depression, but it is very good for depression, especially if somebody is very cynical about life and feels like they have no control left to them. I was going to say something else and completely gone out of my head what I was going to say, but oh yes. So ordinarily you have this idea that somebody almost has to go to rock bottom before they can bounce back up again. This kind of just goes, let's stop you on the way. You can often see people, who have got, I don't want to say personality disorders because that's not what I mean, but those kind of people who live in a paradigm of being angry and depressed. You kind of know that sooner or later somebody's going to get up and leave you, or you're just going to go too far. And then that's when that's when the universe takes control and they start to kind of go, oh, I need to make some changes. But Cajeput just helps them go, we're going to make changes now. It's really phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah. While you're talking, a blend came straight into my head. So I'd combine, in this kind of case, Cajeput with Fregonia, bergamot, and just a single drop of Melissa in there as well. And I think they would really help with that, reinstilling hope, reinstilling confidence in oneself, and kind of helping you to push off from wherever you are at that point in time. What I find is, with the Melaleucas, I find they're all really good at clearing away something that's in our, I guess that's that astringent nature translating into the holistics. And whereas I find tea tree to be really good for, so beautiful for the heart chakra and clearing away. And if you haven't seen our tea tree episode, go back and where I talk about it, clearing away things where we don't feel worthy or that we feel we have to earn love. And that often comes from very young childhood and that type of thing. Really good for that emotional love kind of stuff. But Cajuput, I kind of, a dance between it having a bit of a lunar energy, but also I know in your mum's book, it's called the Garden of Eden, your mum's book, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. She says she refers to it as being a Saturn oil, and I can see how this one more is really good at kind of clearing away those negative mind states. And when you first started talking, I thought, oh, that's interesting. That's not really how I'm relating to it. But then, as you kind of weaved your story, I was like, no, we are kind of again on the same page. This is one when there's things like excuses. People sometimes talk about, oh, I've got money blocks, or I've got this kind of block that's getting in my way, procrastination, any of those types of things that kind of make our journey, our journey doesn't always have to be a straight line as Saturn would like it to be. But I think sometimes we take too much of a windy road and get too much of that, like you said, that too much of a yin energy. And I think this one's a really good one for clearing that away to kind of help us get back on track. So I think anyone who feels like they've lost their way, this is going to be a really great essential oil to work with.
I think that was a good analogy. I just want to be really clear to people that what we're not talking about here with the people from Sellafield is excuses. These were not excuses. These were absolute reasons. There was no work, there was no money, they were losing their houses. But you picked out a tremendous word which I should have used, and I think worth is a really good word, that they felt that they had lost their worth. Why would you want to be with me? I look like this, I haven't got a job, it was my job to keep it, this, because these were very men's men. We're going back how long? Oh my goodness, we're going back 30 years. Men were different people then. It was my job to keep our roof over you, it was my job to provide for you, and they couldn't, they just couldn't. And so everything had been taken from them. And so that word that you picked, that they felt that they had no worth, is absolutely accurate. And yeah, it did seem to restore it. It did seem to restore it.
Another circumstance, which is a bit more general and universal, that I'm wondering if this would be a great oil for, is when men retire. And what I've noticed, I don't know if you've noticed this in your lifetime and your experience and with clients, but men still do have that duty of my purpose in life is to go to work, I earn the money, and then that's kind of my main thing. And then suddenly one day they retire. And because they may not have had so much of a responsibility in the housekeeping and maybe the family, or because they haven't really devoted their time to finding other pastimes and things to do, they go, oh, great, I'm retired. I've got all this time to do. Well, I don't know what to do. And I've noticed how men mentally and physically sometimes can go into a bit of a dark hole there because they don't know who they are, because who they've always been. Like the men in Glasgow you were telling me about, they've always had this, they identify themselves as not knowing themselves, but I am the worker, or I am the provider, or I am the whatever job role they have. And I wonder if this would be a great oil for helping people to kind of stop them kind of going off that cliff.
Maybe, but I think a better example would be those who have been made redundant, because usually with retirement, you essentially know it's coming, right? So you have made some kind of provision in your mind of thought about, well, I'm going to spend all my time fishing, or I'm going to spend all my time on the golf course, and you've kind of gone there. But redundancy, I think one of the things that was really key to this was one day they had everything, the next day they had nothing.
Mm.
And so the shock factor went through their body. It was like, I had done everything right. I'd put a little bit, I hadn't got very much money, but I'd put a bit of money away. And, I'd done all of the things that I was supposed to do. And then something out of my control just came and smashed it to pieces. Yeah, I think redundancy would be a good application. I'm just staring because there's a flying thing with me. I was just thinking, is that a bee? Angry, but it's a fly, so we're all right.
Oh, good. Yeah. Another circumstance I'm wondering if you feel this would be relevant for is, we often have, it might be a teenager, or, it could be anyone they're at a point in their life where they feel like you're worried they're losing their way. They may be going off. And I wonder if this one, again, I'm thinking about when we're in a pool and we kind of go to the bottom and then we push off the bottom. And I'm kind of getting the feeling that Cajeput, it almost brings up the bottom so that we can elevate ourselves quicker rather than hitting that rock bottom. So do you think anyone who's a little bit lost and confused, of course, Cajeput having that eucalyptol would help with the respiratory system, that helps to bring in oxygen, but also helps to bring life force back in when we feel that we've got no life. Do you think, would you think of using it in those circumstances?
I think what an interesting way to look at it outside of the essential oil is to think about the mind body connection with skin. And quite often when you look at skin problems holistically with a mind body connection in mind, what you'll see is that the face, the skin is what we allow people to see about ourselves. And so, for example, somebody who has eczema might feel like they're being quite flaky in life. With psoriasis, you definitely have this like armor of, you don't really want people to see what's going on behind the scenes. And certainly in the teenage world at the moment, I don't know if you have watched the amazing thing on Netflix that's happened over the past couple of months called Adolescence. Absolutely fantastic piece of TV. If you do get the opportunity to watch it, especially if you have children, you definitely should. I won't go into any spoilers, but it's very much about the fact that as adults, we do not understand the world the way that they do, and the pressures and the voices that they are hearing from social media that we just are oblivious to. And to give a little bit about this story, it's a young boy kills somebody, and it's about the police unpicking what's happened, and it becomes very clear that one of there's many things that have happened to this poor little boy in his perfect life. I mean, his mum and dad are, he's not from a neglected home, none of those things. But what's hidden from adults is is like how the language of emojis, the things that are being said, the way that he's been bullied. The police are looking at the text and they can't even see that he's been bullied because we don't know the language. We just don't know it. And I think that there is a narrative, particularly for boys at the moment, that is very, very harmful, that if girls don't fancy you, then it makes them very angry. There's these involuntary celibate narrative going through. And I think that this kind of like shield that goes around them, that they become hard, that they become angry, that they become, as if like, well, it's not our fault. And exactly how we just described it, we've got this anger, we've got this bitterness, we've got this cynicism. I have to say, Oh, I'm going to touch wood. I don't see that with my boys and with their friends so far, thank goodness. But there does seem to be a generation of boys who are angry at the world, and they feel that they are ugly. They are being told that they don't fit the mold. That I think it's called 80/20. That 80% of women will like the top 20% of men, and so if they don't come into that 20%, then they don't. They're very angry at life, and Cajeput would be amazing for that.
Yeah, interesting. It was. I'm just thinking. I'm actually working on a presentation for the weekend on talking about boys and hormones and different things like that. And as I was looking for images and stuff, I did find an article which is 10 ways to be more attractive. And the whole thing was actually not about like look after your skin and that type of thing. It was very much about if someone doesn't like you, don't take it personally. It was all about how you conduct yourself and build yourself up, just exactly like what you're talking about as well, which is really interesting. So, when it comes to astrology, for me, it's a bit of a cleanser of lunar energy and brings in a bit of Saturn energy. Where would you place it on the astrological table for Cajuput?
Well, it's funny. I never looked in Mum's book. I never gave it a thought to look in her book. Maybe I knew it was Saturn from being taught her that way, but Saturn, just this kind of not so much. We talk about Saturn as being dull and depressive. Um, but Saturn's just so much about the fact that you have this constriction, that you're this oppression that lasts for a really long time. So when you have like a Saturn return, you've got 2.5 years where there's nothing you can do but go with what Saturn wants. And we can talk about medical astrology in a way that says, excuse me, in a way that says we want to like match up, like for example Mars with the blood. We can say we can do it that way, but we also talk about how it's like the antidote to the medicine. And so Saturn is all about oppression. You can't do anything but go with it. That's exactly the situation that we see. That it's long, it's convoluted, it's bitter. Though all of those things, and there's kind of a greyness to it. I don't really know why I say that, but there is a greyness to Saturn, and it's almost like the colour of the scales on the psoriasis to me go grey. So I would say yes, Saturn.
Mm. Now, when I'm kind of sitting here playing around in my head, and I'm definitely not going to place bets on any of these that I feel 100% comfortable with, but chakras. What do you feel with the chakras?
Solar plexus, identity, the
Yeah.
the the replenishment of will, but also thinking about how it treats. Well, I've talked about how the skin is a reflection of your identity out into the world. That's a very solar plexus thing, but also, parasites in the intestines. That digestive element, it's not really a digestive oil. There's loads of oils that you could use it would be better as digestive, but it is really good for like, well, I'm trying to articulate what I'm trying to say, like invaders, things that get inside you, or things that get under your skin, actually, is
Mm.
a really good way of describing it, things that get under your skin. And don't forget too that the Saturn rules the bones, but also the skin. Mm.
It almost, in a way, is very much to do this as an oil that kind of plays with our boundaries, doesn't it? Kind of thing, like our boundaries of our skin, our boundaries of where we're willing to go, and different things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, because we do. I mean, everything that we've talked about is about like the emotional and mental boundaries and spiritual boundaries that we develop in a
Yep.
response to life. And I do think that this is about a response to life, a spiritual response to life.
Mm. Yeah, fascinating. Well, I've learned a lot about Cajuput today, and I hope everyone else has as well. We'll be back next week for another episode of, oh, I was about to say my crystal one, of Fellowship in Essential
Yeah,
Oils. No, we're not. Me and Liz won't be doing a crystal confab. We're going to do fellowship in essential oils. We'll be back again next week. Until then, take care, enjoy your oils, and blessed be.
If you liked the conversation today, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
And also send it to someone who might have found this helpful as well. We'd really appreciate that.